The Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and your local cable provider presents Cable Reports. Join us now as Cable Reports brings you up to date on current issues facing the Commonwealth through discussions with your local legislators and other policymakers from across Virginia.
From the General Assembly and the City of Richmond, I'm Woody Evans for Cable Reports and the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association, connecting Virginians to their government. We're pleased to have with us today Senator Ryan McDougle. Good to see you.
Thank you, Woody. Glad to be here.
Now, you are in a leadership position in the Senate. You chair the Senate Republican Caucus, do you not?
I do. I'm the number 2 Republican on the Senate side. I've been chairman of the caucus for about, 5 years going on now. We have a very good team. We've been as low as 18 members, and now we are at 21, which means every member is very important as we're trying to come to decisions. And it's a lot of work making sure everybody's on the same page, has access to all the information so they can make good decisions.
And what are your duties and responsibilities as the caucus chair?
Well, I work with our majority leader, and he and I meet with the House of Delegates on a very frequent basis. We try to coordinate how legislation is moving through the process, things that we see as issues, things as we see as way to collaborate and work together. We work with our own caucus, and then we work with the members of the other parties. So we are talking to the leadership of the Senate Democratic Caucus, and we also talk with the governors and the governor's office on a frequent basis, trying to make sure that if there are ways we can work together, that we do that, and if there are ideas that we have differing opinions on, that we're protecting Virginians from our point of view.
And I don't think many people understand the importance of the Rules Committee that you chair as well. Tell us about that committee and why it has an essential role in the Senate.
Well, the Senate is organized very differently from the House of Delegates, and I think a lot of people think about the structure of a legislative body the way they do the House. On the Senate side, the chairman of the Rules Committee has a significant amount of responsibilities that the Speaker of the House does. It has responsibilities sitting when committees meet, trying to make sure the logistics of all the process goes on seamlessly, which takes a lot of effort. There are a lot of decisions that I am continually asked, not only during session, but outside of session. There's not a week goes by that we're not having to make decisions about when committees can meet, people's access to certain things. So it's a lot of responsibility. But we also look at legislation. In our Senate rules, we've established committees and what those committees are responsible for. But there are some items of legislation that don't fit in a traditional transportation committee or finance committee, and all of those bills will go to the Senate Rules Committee. Some of them are pretty significant decisions, and so we will meet as a committee as well. We're also responsible for appointments. The way the legislature and the executive branch are set out in Virginia, the governor has a tremendous amount of authority to appoint individuals, but there are a number of appointments that are made by the legislature. On the House side, the Speaker of the House makes those appointments, and on the Senate side, the Rules Committee makes those appointments. So one of the things I'm working on this week is our list of appointments that we will likely attempt to approve next week.
Great, great. Now, you are a practicing attorney. You were a prosecutor for quite a while, and I know your experience there has informed the kinds of things you've been involved in here in the General Assembly, especially as it relates to violence against children, for example, and protecting our children. Tell us a little bit about the work you've done in that regard.
You know, Woody, we're all experiences of what we've endured through our life. I grew up working in a small family business. My mom still runs it. It's called Sandy's Plants. That's framed a lot of my thought process about regulation and government impacting business. But I was a prosecutor for a number of years before I got elected, and that certainly has framed my thought process about access to justice and protecting our citizens, particularly children. I have a 3-year-old little girl, and I want to make sure that the community is safe for her as she continues to grow up. So we've worked very hard, the team in my office, to make sure that we're promoting legislation over the years that does that gives tools to law enforcement, gives tools to prosecutors, and makes the system work better together. Last year, I sponsored legislation to create child abuse response teams. Sounds very simple. When I was a prosecutor, we put one together just as a team. We took law enforcement, different branches of law enforcement in the area, social services that were investigating complaints, Commonwealth's Attorney's Office, and mental health. Everybody came together as we looked at cases of child abuse that were either criminal or not yet criminal, and we tried to make sure we were all working in the same direction. We took that same model and created teams for every jurisdiction across the state. So whether you live in Middlesex or you live in King George or you live in Wise County, everybody will be working together to make sure we're handling these very important cases in the right way going forward.
So there's more coordination.
More coordination. We've also taken that same coordination concept and we're working on some missing persons legislation this year. We've had some really horrible news stories that have come out of the Charlottesville area, some really horrible family situations. But there have been other situations across the state that have not had bad results of missing children. There was one actually closer to home in Hanover County where law enforcement found a child that had been missing and the family was extremely worried, there were some issues with autism with the child, and the law enforcement community, the sheriff came together, they had a plan, they had an organization, and they executed that plan and organization very rapidly. So we've talked with them. They've helped us as we've crafted the legislation. We've talked with law enforcement from across the state, emergency management and their response teams, and we said, what do we need to do to make sure that regardless of whether a family member or a child goes missing in Virginia, wherever that is, everybody will know this is the path to have the most effective search and to get the best results. That first 24 to 48 hours are absolutely critical. So we're putting in place best practices. We'll have the ability to draw up what those are, what the checklist response for every law enforcement department will be, and where those resources are for them to get help if they don't have the resources in their individual community to do it on their own. But taking that same concept of let's work together, let's have a plan in advance so that when a situation comes up, we can activate it instead of having to figure out what are the best responses while the tragedy is going on.
Now, another critical tool in that arsenal that you have been instrumental in relates to DNA collection database. Tell us about that.
Well, when I was a prosecutor, we saw a lot of crimes. A number of them were violent, and we want to give law enforcement tools to be able to investigate those crimes, but we also want to be able to protect people that are innocent and protect their liberty. So we looked at the process and said, how can we give those tools and do that protection? So we came up with a solution that said, if you are arrested for a violent felony, we'll take a DNA sample at the time of arrest. DNA sample is actually very simply done. It's we call it a swab. It's almost like a Q-tip. You just run it in your mouth and we test it. But I also wanted to make sure that citizens were protected. So you take the sample, you run it, it's run against the database, but if you're found not guilty or the government doesn't go forward with the case, then that sample is destroyed, protecting innocent people in case they were charged improperly. But those tools enable us to do things like the Jesse Matthews case. He was arrested for a violent felony, able to take a DNA sample and test that against other evidence from across the state. Those are the types of tools law enforcement has found to be very effective helping to solve violent crimes. And we've literally solved thousands of crimes since that legislation went into effect. And one of those, we always look at our terms in office, and that was one of the things that I was able to get accomplished, that I said, I know I've made our community safer going forward because we've taken some violent criminals off the street.
I understand there's also an anti-child pornography images registry.
We've worked a lot to make sure that we are doing those things that protect our children, and child pornography is one of the things that predators will typically use to prey on our children. So we've had to be creative based on Supreme Court cases and things that have come down over the years, and tried to create different ways to protect our children and yet protect people's privacy. It can be a challenging job, but we've worked very hard and have some good policies in place.
Great, great. Tell us a little bit about shoreline erosion, because I know that you're really concerned about the environment and how we're going to conserve it, the Chesapeake Bay, and those kinds of issues.
Woody, my district is the best in the Commonwealth of Virginia. I spent my life growing up on the Potomac River, have seen just the benefits that the river and the bay has for not only the citizens, but for everybody. It's a great place to recreate, great place for people to make their livings, and it's just a great place to grow up. But we need to make sure that we're protecting that. And whether it's on the Potomac River, whether it's on the Pamunkey River, or whether it's on the Rappahannock River, and all in between, because we have a lot of water in our part of the state, we need to make sure that those shorelines are being protected so they're not eroding into our rivers, causing that type of sediment and environmental challenges. So we've been working with our soil and water conservation groups, particularly in the Northern Neck and the Middle Peninsula, to try to preserve their shorelines. We've been able to include some money in previous budgets, and I'm working particularly with Delegate Ranson right now in order to try to make sure we continue to do more on our shoreline protections. But it is really important to the life of the bay, and not just fish and crabs and oysters, but our entire ecosystem.
And I know many parents and their kids are very happy once a year because of the Virginia Back to School sales tax holiday. Tell us about that. I know that's something that you were very instrumental in creating.
Well, right when I came into the Senate, we'd been working when I was in the House of Delegates for a number of years to pass a back to school sales tax holiday. We'd seen other states do it. At that particular time, Virginia was almost an island. The states to our north and south were having back to school sales tax holidays. So citizens that lived in the northern part of the state or the southern part of the state were going across the borders to buy their clothes and school supplies, computers, technology, right before school, and spending their dollars in other states, their tax dollars going elsewhere. We wanted to have that opportunity for all Virginians when they're preparing to send their kids back to school, that they can get those supplies, whether it be clothes or technology for their children, and not pay the rate of tax that they would normally. So we created a back to school sales tax holiday. Gives the businesses the opportunity to get individuals in the store, but really it protects our citizens and gives them the opportunity to buy those needed materials without paying sales tax for that holiday weekend. And it's been a tremendous success over years. Now, instead of Virginians going to other states to buy those school supply items, people from other states come to Virginia on that holiday, which is not only great for the economy, but great for people.
Let's talk about the economy a little bit, because you've got a fairly large district. You've got about 200,000 constituents overall. How is the economy faring? Has it come out of the Great Recession?
There's some things that are really good that are going on, Woody. The gas prices are lower. My district has a lot of rural areas. We have to drive a lot. I drive a tremendous amount through my district. Having gas prices that are lower in our rural communities makes life easier, makes it easier for all the bills to be taken care of at the end of the month. So that is a positive. But we are still struggling with jobs. We have a diverse economy. We have people that work in Hampton Roads, Richmond, Dahlgren, Northern Virginia, because that's where the jobs are. And a lot of those jobs are dependent on contractors working for the federal government, particularly the Department of Defense, in a civilian nature. And those have been hit really hard, and it's made it a challenge. We've also had some challenges locally with employers not being able to survive that recessionary period, and that has made a challenge. So we're trying to be creative and work together to come up with ways to incentivize companies to move to the area, make it easier for the businesses that are here to stay afloat and continue to expand. Delegate Keith Hodges has been working really hard to bring the entire team, in particularly the Middle Peninsula, together to work as a unit to not only advertise our area for businesses, but for tourists to come in. We've worked to try to get the oyster trail up and going to make sure, particularly in our summer and months or warmer months, that people are coming in and taking advantage of the oyster. Maryland stole the crab from us, but we're not going to let them take the oyster. And we've been working to create enterprise zones so that in our rural areas, businesses can locate and have the same advantages that they would in urban areas. But it's still a challenge out there. So we're also looking on a more global focus as well. And we're trying to see what can we do in Virginia to lure companies that have taken their operations overseas back to Virginia. That's why I'm introducing the Reinvest in Virginia Act. We've been working with the State Chamber of Commerce and saying if a company has located their business and production overseas and they want to move that portion of their business back to Virginia, we're going to have that business operate and not pay the same amount of tax that they would if they had been here already. That's a great opportunity because those businesses have moved overseas in large part because they don't have to pay corporate income tax. Not that the citizens don't pay tax on their earnings or pay tax on the things they buy, but corporate income tax. And we're trying to bring those opportunities which make it better for everybody. So I think from the Senate Republican caucus, we have a big package of legislation that include a number of things from trying to improve the port and opportunities in Hampton Roads, trying to improve our rural opportunities through enterprise zones, and trying just to bring more business into Virginia as a global perspective to make the economy better.
Talk to us a little bit more about the importance of the Port of Virginia. As a matter of fact, I think it's only one of two ports on the eastern seaboard that will be capable of handling the larger ships as they come through the Panama Canal that has been upgraded recently.
So little known information to I think a lot of Virginians, but Virginia has been blessed with a specific port makeup that allows us to take the largest ships. I think they're called 60 TCUs, and they weigh heavier in the water, so they go deeper. And most ports on the eastern seaboard are not deep enough and cannot be dredged to take those largest ships. We have that opportunity here in Hampton Roads. So we've been working to try to market that to shipping companies to say, bring your commerce here. It creates jobs in the port. It creates jobs for people supplying supplies to the port, and it also makes it cheaper for Virginians because if the products come in locally, the transportation cost to get them to the stores or where they want to purchase them is less than if they go into California and then have to be shipped to Chicago and down to Virginia. So it is a win-win. Job creation, products are easier to be obtained and cheaper for Virginians. But there again, it's a global perspective. Some large shipping groups out of Taiwan and Europe and China, and we've been working very hard to attract those to Virginia so that that commerce will come here instead of going to another state in the country.
And of course, that's part of the responsibility you have as a member of the Transportation Committee in the House, in the Senate. And of course, there's an issue of importance there on a local level in terms of new transportation companies wanting to enter the state of Virginia, the Ubers and the Lyfts of the world. And I know that's a fairly complicated subject, but can you give us the lay of the land there?
Absolutely. It is one of the most complicated solutions we've tried to work to resolve. It doesn't necessarily impact my district as much as some others because we're rural, and so it's not as readily available in the rural part of the state. But these companies have created technology that allows any individual person to operate a transportation system just with their personal vehicle. And the two big known names are Uber and Lyft. There's an app on your telephone, and if you want someone to pick up, you punch the app, the face of the driver shows up and how far away they are from you, and you can rate them as having been a good driver historically or good on this trip, and everybody who's using the app can see. That is not a regulatory scheme that we've ever had. We've always had the traditional taxi cab schemes, things that you see at airports, and we have regulation based on those. And It's different in every jurisdiction. Each local community has the ability to regulate taxi cabs. We also have things like limousines, and here locally we have, I think it's James River, and we have Groom Transportation, and there are many others, but those are companies that you can hire a car to drive you somewhere or pick you up and take you to things. This is a different concept because they're individual people, and the company, Uber or Lyft, are just providing the technology to enable it to work. It's very hard to take that new technology concept and put it in place with our current rules. And so we've been trying to come together and make sure that if one of those drivers has an accident, that the person that is hit, the Virginia citizen, is protected and able to have their medical and personal property expenses covered, while not being an impediment to this new business opportunity coming into Virginia. And it's proven to be a lot more difficult than you would think. I was here till well past 9:30 last night trying to work on a solution, and there were members that stayed here well past that, and we're back at it again this morning.
So the competing interests are legion, if you will. I mean, you've got on the one side the companies you mentioned that are entrenched here, so to speak. They are under one regulatory scheme. You've got the new entrant who doesn't want to be under the same regulatory scheme. So trying to balance those competing interests and the interests of consumers is very difficult.
And that the last one you said, the interest of Virginians, that's the most difficult one, because you have each of the business sides wanting to make sure they can operate as a business, but we have to remember at the end of the day, we need to make sure that the consumers, Virginians, are protected if they use the product or are negatively impacted by the product. And striking that balance can be very, very challenging. We spend a lot of time working on it. Legislature, even though they call it a part-time job, is taking well past full-time hours.
Now, you mentioned the amount of windshield time you have visiting the geographic areas in your district. What kinds of transportation needs are specific to your district?
Well, my district, again, it is very diverse. So I have the interstates of 95 and 295 that run through large portions of my district. Many of my constituents have to use 64 to get to work or to visit family members. And then we have a lot of challenge. Water brings a lot of opportunities, but also brings some challenges in that you have to get across it if you want to go anywhere. So one of the biggest challenges that we've had are bridges and making sure that they're safe, particularly the Norse Bridge between Middlesex and Lancaster County. We've had to work on that on a number of different situations to make that sure that bridge is being maintained in a way that is safe for the citizens, but still allowing access from each side, particularly for emergency vehicles. So many of the challenges that I deal with in district on transportation deal with bridges and their safety and security. And it is difficult because they are very expensive to deal with.
Now, you are a product of our public schools, and you have a youngster, and I know you want to be able to maintain the public schools, K through 8, our community colleges, our institutions of higher learning. There's been a lot of discussion over the past few years about education in general. There was an entity that was created to take over failing schools. I believe that legislation in Roanoke was declared unconstitutional by a circuit court judge. What's the status of that? What's the status of the need to tweak the SOLs further and those kinds of issues?
Education is a tremendous duty that we have. The state constitution says it is the responsibility of the Virginia General Assembly to provide a quality education. Unfortunately, there are some jurisdictions in the state that is not occurring. The Constitution also said it is a lot of the decisions are solely left up to the local community and the school board. And that's created some tension because we see that there are approximately half a dozen schools that have been failing for almost a decade, and that's unacceptable in my opinion. We tried to craft legislation that would address that, give the state the ability to come in and take over those schools temporarily to get them back on their feet, provide that level of education that Virginians expect. And it's important not just for the kids in that community, but for all of us, because if we can raise the level of academic excellence up in those schools, it helps everybody, not just that community, but across the Commonwealth. Court in Norfolk said that even though we had good intentions and we were trying to deal with the problem, it was still the responsibility of the locality, not the state. We can disagree on whether the court got the answer right, but that is the law of the land today. So now we have to look to other ways, and it's very challenging if a locality will not put in place the things they need to do to make the schools better. But we're also looking at the entire state. What can we do to make our academic system better? Virginia, I think, was in the forefront of creating the standards of learning. Those are very helpful to make sure that students have some basic level of knowledge when they move from one grade level to another. But we're having to go back now and tweak or change some of those, reduce some of the number, because what is also very important is making sure that students aren't just learning what's on the test. They need to think creatively. They need to know how systems operate and why you might not look at things in a straight line direction. You might need to be more creative. My wife is a college professor at VCU. She teaches criminal justice. And one of the things she will oftentimes tell me is she wishes that some of her students were coming to her with more of that creative thought process. But we also, that's in the traditional K-12 model going to universities, but we also have some real needs in our community for people with skills and trades that they would not get in a four-year institution. My mom owns a plant business, and one of the things she's always telling me is, I really need some people that have certain skills and trades. I don't need them to have some piece of paper that hangs on their wall, which is very important and good to have. I need them to have these specific trades and understandings.
So that's where our junior colleges come in.
Our community college are absolutely critical to doing that. We have Rappahannock and Germanna in our area. They've been working to create those programs, working with businesses, particularly at the Glens campus, to create opportunities for students to come in and learn and get certificates, and then be able to take those directly to businesses and apply that trade. But that is the concept we've been working on. It's challenging changing the school system to fit the needs of the 21st century, but we're working hard to get it done.
Well, there's a lot to talk about, but I think we're out of time.
Thank you, Woody.
Thank you for being here, Senator Ryan McDougle. Thank you for watching Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association, connecting Virginians to their government. Until next time, I'm Woody Evans.
Mm-hmm.